Hello there, pipe smokers of Ireland, lads and lasses of the pipe smokers of Ireland. This is the Pipepastor coming to you once again. My residence video for this week. Let's see, what would that be? 14th, 15th, 16th, maybe 16th, 17th, something like that. In any case, good to be with you. I'm smoking today my Larison. One of my favorite pipes. Kind of a tree bark rustication with a green Cumberland stem. One of my favorite stems. Besides amber, I think green Cumberland is my next favorite. And Larry did a great job. Right. Smoking some Black Gold Plus in it. A real delicious smoke today. It's a little overcast, but not too cold. Kind of nice. And I want to give a shout out to one of our members, Herman Hostetler. He's got a great YouTube channel himself. He's got some marvelous videos on there, and encourage you to go watch him, especially his videos where he's cooking up things. He's a marvelous cook, and his food looks delicious. Let me tell you, looks really good. So last week we talked about social sloth, or not putting enough effort into being friendly and having friends, and what goes along with that is leisure and recreation, working too hard and not playing enough, not fellowshipping enough. And Ecclesiastes 4 is where we're at, and it kind of follows through with that thought. In verse 7, it says, "Again I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone, and he had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling?" he asked. "And why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless and a miserable business." So Solomon's kind of staying with the theme of being alone versus being with a friend. And he follows it through in verse 9 and 10, which is two marvelous verses of scripture we'll get to in a minute. It's awful noisy out here today, sorry about that. But in any case, in scripture, funny thing is that the scripture says that God made everything and said everything was good. And the first time we find out something is not good is in the opening chapter of Genesis, where we're told that Genesis 2, where God had put Adam in the garden, and Adam was alone. Woman wasn't created yet. And God addresses the loneliness of Adam by saying, that's not good. Everything was good and very good until that moment when the loneliness of Adam was addressed. Now in Genesis chapter 1, you get this macro view of creation. In Genesis chapter 2, you get a micro view of creation. So when God stepped back and looked at Adam and Eve and the garden and everything, he said that was very good. But before he said that, chapter 2 actually gives us a close-up, slower narrative of the creation story, in which God painstakingly takes Adam and puts him in the garden and leaves him alone there to figure out how he's going to pull off his job description. And God saw that Adam was alone and that was not good for him to be alone. And so God creates a helpmeet for him, woman. And then Genesis chapter 3 comes in and sin enters the world. And the first thing that happens once sin enters the world is that Adam and Eve put on fig leaves, let's say. They try to cover their nakedness from themselves. Then they hide in trees to try to hide their nakedness from God. Because one of the things that sin is known for is that it separates close friends and separates husbands and wives. Sin comes between people. Sin separates people. And bitterness and anxiety and frustration and mistrust and hurt enter into the human equation in Genesis chapter 3. And the results are staggering today. We're more isolated today than we've ever been, more lonely, more busy than ever before in history. And as a result, many more of us are learning to or choosing to do life alone. And our idea of fellowship is bonding with characters in our favorite weekly series or in a video game or computer game. More and more young executives are starting to choose not to get married, not to have families, because they don't fit in to their workaholic equation. And Solomon is arguing that life is more content, life is more happy and productive when you do it with someone else. In fact, verse 9 says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. And things are also safer when you work, when you travel, when you recreate, when you do it with a friend. Verse 10 says, if either of them fall down, one can help the other up. But pity a man who falls and has no one to help him up. So things go better when you have a friend. Things go better when we do it in company. I know as someone who struggles with toxic shame, one of the things that shame does, it causes a person to feel as if they are uniquely flawed and that no one else is as flawed as they are. Everybody else may have problems, but not like them. Everybody else may have their own issues, but they're better than they are. And as a result, whenever a person with shame screws up, they don't think that they screwed up doing something, but they think they screwed up because they themselves are screwed up. They don't do wrong, they are wrong, basically. And one of the core fears of toxic shame is the fear of disconnection, the fear of not being able to connect, or the fear of losing connection once you made it. And I run into more and more people every year that are bound in shame and bound in a spirit, if you will, of rejection. And so, yeah, it's understandable that loneliness and isolation are growing phenomenons in the days in which we live. And that's a shame. And Solomon is countering that, at least with wisdom that says otherwise, says that if you want a meaningful life, you need to learn to do life with others. In verse 11 he says, also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves, and a threefold cord cannot be easily broken. Then he talks about another thing that disillusions a person who tries to create for themselves a persona or a cartoonish alter ego, if you will, that he then throws out as a decoy for other people to appreciate, accept, respect other than himself. It's safer to create a false identity. And so he says in verse 13, and he goes on, verse 13 all the way through 16, better is a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king, who no longer knows how to heed a warning. The youth may come from prison to the kingship, or he may have been born in poverty within his kingdom. But I saw that all who lived and walked under the sun followed the youth, the king's successor. And there was no end to all the people who were before them. But those who came later were not pleased with the successor, the young man. And this too is meaningless in a chasing after the wind. Now, in those 4 verses, Solomon reminds us popularity is fleeting, and therefore we're better to choose influence over being popular. And what's in view here is a succession of kings, none of whom fully satisfies the populace. And from this unimpressive position, it may be possible to influence more people than you ever thought possible. And influence must always trump popularity, because popularity is temporal, but influence can outlive it by many, many years. Most of you are probably too young to remember the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys who became a really popular commentator with Howard Cosell. And they were the ones that started Monday Night Football. His name was Don Meredith, but Don Meredith used to say about quarterbacks, today you're in the penthouse, tomorrow you're in the outhouse. In other words, your popularity is very fleeting. And I used to remember when I was looking at playing pro ball that winning the Super Bowl was a dream of anybody in the NFL. And it wasn't so much money that you made, it wasn't the Vince Lombardi trophy, but it was the fame. It was that moment of supreme glory and the honor of owning and wearing that Super Bowl ring, man. The Super Bowl ring was the most coveted prize in sports at one time, on par with the Olympic gold medal. But even getting a Super Bowl ring and the high that brought these guys was fleeting. Charlie Walters, who played for the Dallas Cowboys when they won the Super Bowl, had 5 Super Bowl rings. 5. And these things are huge. And all 5 were stolen from him. Somebody raided his house, stole them from his closet. All at once, lost. Joe Gilliam won 2 Super Bowl rings as a coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he had to pawn them off for a few dollars after being caught in a vicious cycle of drug addiction and homelessness. Another former Steeler, Rocky Blyer, sold his 4 rings to cover his divorce and bankruptcy proceedings. The Cowboys' Thomas Henderson had his Super Bowl ring seized to pay back his taxes. Former Raiders All-Pro cornerback Lester Hayes sold his to pay for his dental work. Mercury Morris sold his ring to raise money to clear his name during a drug trafficking case. I mean, this hard work, all of this effort, sweat, tears to get that ring, and all the glory it supposedly stood for, and the hype, the commercial time, all that stuff, proved to just be fool's gold. Its luster quickly tarnished. It didn't vanish. As Houston sports writer Steve Campbell put it, he said, "One of the dirty secrets about the Super Bowl is that the winner's high often has less of a shelf life than a container of cottage cheese." So I guess Solomon's point here is that achievement and riches and popularity and fame can all expire on us like vapor and become nothing but utter futility, symbols of utter futility. And Solomon is saying here, you know what's better? God's way is better. God's way in addressing loneliness is by bringing people into our lives that can help us, can be our friends, can form lasting friendships that are vital to our survival as well as to our happiness. Because everything, work and food and leisure and even being able to defend oneself against danger, everything goes better with folk. What do you think about that? Remember a song by Simon and Garfunkel. I am a rock and I am an island. Well, that was heavy. That song was heavy. The last line of the song is, and a rock feels no pain and an island never dies. But it also never loves, never is loved. Are you very easy to love? Are you a very easy person to love? Do you receive love well? Do you believe people when they tell you that they love you, or even if they like you? Is love for you one-sided? You give love, but you can't receive it? Do you fear disconnection? Do you feel like a fraud and that people never really know the real you? Is intimacy something that's foreign to you and hard for you to achieve? Do you do friendship well? Are you a good friend? What's a good friend to you? What are the qualities you register as qualities that make up a good friend? I'd like to know what you think. Leave a comment or talk about it a little bit. Okay, this is the Pipepastor coming to you once again from Fresno, California. Asante.